We are now live. You can proceed.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council's Planning Committee for Wednesday the 16th of September 2020. My name is Councillor Holt. I'm Chairman of the committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to this virtual committee, and I'd like to read out a statement about how we will proceed. Can I please ask those members who haven't muted their microphone to mute, because there's some slight background noise. During the COVID-19 pandemic, virtual planning committee meetings are taking place. This is a subsequent planning committee meeting that we've held on a virtual basis, and there are changes to the way the committee will operate when compared to our previous meeting, particularly with regard to public speaking, and I will explain the process accordingly. May I remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the internet, and the record will be archived for future viewing. We are using the WebEx system this evening, and members and officers will be communicating via that system. As set out in the agenda papers and on the website, any member of the press and public may listen to the proceedings at this virtual meeting via a web link, which has been publicised on the Council's website. The participants in this meeting will be councillors concerned, the officers advising the committee, and any members of the public or ward members registered to speak in the public speaking arrangements. For registered speakers, we have arrangements for this meeting as follows. Registered speakers will this evening be able to address the meeting when invited to do so. If there are any issues with connections during the particular speaking opportunity, or registered speaker has informed us in advance that they will not be using the facility, officers will be able to read out any written statement that the registered speaker has submitted. These arrangements do not allow for any additional material to be presented over and above the verbal representation written statement, although PowerPoint presentations may on occasions be given. May I remind officers and members participating this evening that during the meeting all participants are in control of their own microphones. You must place your microphone on mute whilst not speaking on an item. As the chairman, I will use my discretion as to the order in which participants speak, or announce whom I wish to speak. The nominated speaker should then unmute their microphone and mute it after they have finished their contribution. I remind members that they should not use the chat facility, as this is only for the chairman and officers to use. With regard to declarations, if a declaration is required after the meeting has started, this should be announced in the usual way. With regard to voting, may I remind members of the committee that you are only allowed to participate in the vote if you have been present for the whole agenda item, including the officer presentation and debate. If you lose visual connection during the agenda item, you are still allowed to vote. However, if you lose audio or sound connection during the item, you must not vote and have the vote recorded as an abstention. Voting will be by way of roll call by the Democratic Services Officer, who will record the vote. The request of members will be whether they are voting for, against, or abstain on that particular recommendation. The usual procedural rules apply to debate during the consideration of the agenda items, and I, as chairman, have absolute discretion. With regard to an adjournment, if I, as the chairman, wish to adjourn the meeting at any point, I will announce the adjournment and inform you how long the adjournment will be. All participants should remain in the WebEx meeting facility with your microphone muted. I can confirm that the meeting this evening, we have the following members as listed in the agenda papers for the meeting. So if we can go to the agenda, apologies for absence.
There are no apologies this evening, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. We'll be discussing Kingshurst Village Centre tonight. I just want to declare that I'm Vice Chairman of Kingshurst Parish Council. Thank you, Chair.
I suppose I should declare that I've acted for Kingshurst Parish Council myself in a professional capacity, but I don't consider myself to be conflicted. I consider I can continue to debate the matter. Any other matters? Requests of members to address the committee.
There's one request this evening, Chairman, from Councillor DeSico on the application at 68 Needles End Lane. Unfortunately, Councillor DeSico is unable to join us and has asked for a statement to be read out on his behalf.
Okay, thank you. So the planning committee forward to note minutes from the previous meetings of the 19th and 26th of August, pages 7 to 14. Can I ask for a proposer and seconder for accuracy?
Seconded.
Cole, secondly by Councillor Grinsell. Thank you.
Can I just point out that you missed out questions and deputation committee?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Questions and deputations. We had one last time, so I should be careful about that. But thank you, Vice Chairman. Do you have any questions or deputations?
None received this evening, Chairman.
Thank you. The Solihull local plan policies are set out pages 15 and 16. That brings us on to the first item on the agenda. Unless there's any particular wish to take these out of sequence, I think we'll start with the Crescent. Could I invite the officer, please, to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Full planning permission sought for the erection of a new granny annex above an existing detached garage, which in essence involves an extension and slight increase in height above the existing. Now, members will recall that this application was deferred from the previous meeting of the committee to allow officers the opportunity to investigate the internal layout of the adjacent dwelling, which is 16 the Crescent, with particular regard to ascertaining the use of officers confirmed that a full and proper assessment of the impact of the development upon the amenities enjoyed by the occupiers of number 16.
Mr. Hallam, I'm afraid your signal, Mr. Hallam, your signal
Yes.
is not that good, I'm afraid. You're breaking up slightly.
Is that better?
Well, we'll persevere for the time being, but I'm just flagging it up that your voice was absent for a short period. Please carry on.
Thanks. Okay, so with particular regard to the first floor windows in question, it's confirmed that all three serve the same bedroom. Further in this report, officers are content that the proposal will not be unduly harmful to the community, and as such, the assessment, conclusions and recommendation made in the previous report remain the same. If I can just run you through the submitted plans now, please, Lee.
Apologies, members. I'm just struggling loading the plans up. My connection is very slow. Just bear with me for a couple of seconds.
Thank you, Lee. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, the plans are the same as before, so the proposal is exactly as it was previously. There's no changes there. The drawing, though, shows the relationship with the adjacent property, which is number 16. That was the key issue that we needed to get to grips with. Now, if you look at the site layout plan on the bottom right-hand side of that drawing, you'll see there is the layout of a large first floor bedroom at number 16. You will also see that it's served by 3 separate windows. That plan does show a fourth side-facing window. That does not exist though. But there are three front-facing windows that serve that one large bedroom. The main source of light is the bay window that you can see projecting. The proposal is nowhere near the 45-degree line in relation to that. The second source of light is the window adjacent to that. Again, there's no breach of the 45-degree line. And then there's the third window, and yes, there is a breach of the 45-degree line, but as you can see from the elevation drawing directly next to that, the window itself, the top of that window is pretty much level with the top of the roof of the extended garage, so there's going to be minimal impact on light to that window. So having regard to that impact, it is considered that sufficient light will enter the bedroom of number 16 so as not to cause any undue harm to amenity. Next slide, please, Lee. This shows that relationship again in slightly more detail. It's just zoomed in. You can see more clearly what I was talking about, the three windows that serve that bedroom. Next slide, please. Photographs of the application site. You can see the garage block there with the car parked in front. That's to be increased in height to accommodate the annex above. It's all to be used as part of the house as a single dwelling. Next slide, please. More details of the property that it most closely affects. You can see there underneath the red blob or rugby ball shape, the three windows. You can again see them on the floor plan as well. Next slide, please. This is a photograph of the windows in question. You can see at the sides, you can just about make the top of the roof of the garage at the neighbouring property. But you can see that boundary is already planted with a lot of dense vegetation, to the extent that the proposal wouldn't be particularly noticeable through that. Next slide, please. These are photographs taken off the Rightmove website for number 16. This shows the property from the front. It also shows an internal view of the room in question. You can clearly see the three sources of light there. Next slide, please. This is something that we raised last time in my presentation in terms of the impact of the proposal upon the street view and the character of the area. Similar garages of a similar height have been approved elsewhere on the Crescent, which itself is characterised by a whole mix of different types and ages and styles of dwellings. So at number 15, nearby, a similar scheme was approved in terms of height. Next slide, please. It shows more details of it. Next slide, please. That's the garage at number 15. Next slide, please. Again, another similarly sized garage block on a frontage location. This is at number 36 this time. Next slide, please. And that's the end of the show. The recommendation is set out in the report is one of approval, having regard to the main issues in this application, which are the effect of the proposal on the character and appearance of the host property and the surrounding area, the effect of the proposal on the amenities, living conditions of the occupiers of the neighbouring properties, and other material conditions, considerations that include other matters, public sector equality and human rights. But before I close, if I can just remind members of the update note that's been circulated that relates to this. Read that in full for the benefit of people viewing at home. Third-party comments have been received alleging that the existing detached garage building that's to be extended by virtue of this application was not built in accordance with the approved plans and is 60 centimetres away from the boundary of number 16, the Crescent, instead of 100 centimetres as approved. However, members were advised that the existing garage was built more than 4 years ago, and as such, its existing location is established and immune from any form of planning control, and we're not considering that here tonight. It's also noted the floor plan of number 16, the Crescent, suggests that there is a side-facing window serving the first floor bedroom. As I've already mentioned this evening, this is incorrect. There is no such side-facing window, and the room is served by the three existing windows in its front elevation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we have some speakers. The first speaker is Martin Sandler, who's objecting to this application.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak against this this proposal.
It's a pleasure. Welcome to the meeting. Can I let you know that you have 3 minutes to address us? So if you could try and confine your comments to us within that period. Thank you.
I'll try to do that. Thank you very much. We're to this application, and this is partly because we felt that the application was inaccurate and has had to be corrected and corrected again in time for this meeting, I'm pleased to say. However, our view that the drawings on which the 45-degree angle advice has been given this evening remains somewhat incorrect. So, for example, in the planning report, it's advised that the is a metre, number 14 is a metre forward of that at 16, when in fact it's a metre and a half. The other windows are further set back, and it's the agent of the applicant whose drawings have been accepted as confirming this. The bedroom involved is already quite a dark room, although I have to say it doesn't look it in that Rightmove picture because all the lights have been on. But actually any reduction in light in that room is actually going to make quite a significant impact. One of our worries about the undue proximity of the existing garage is that it looks from the plans as though it will be built directly upwards, i.e. the garage wall will be 60 centimetres from our property and the eaves will project a further 30 centimetres. If that building line is continued upwards, then the property, the garage, will be 30 centimetres from our home. The garage, cars and petrol products is obviously a fire risk, and it will take fire no time at all to jump a 30 centimetre gap. I think this is referred to as terracing and is clearly a concern to us from the point of view of our safety. The other point that's been made and not addressed, the planning guidance suggests that a two-storey wall exists that provides us with some privacy from the external staircase, rather than have people viewing our bedroom content therein. This wall that supposedly provides our privacy does not exist. So, in fact, it's another unfortunate error, which has given some false assurance, and it is obviously a concern to us. We pointed out previously that there's quite a large tree in advance of it's about 11 paces in front of the proposed garage development, and the tree's between 20 and 25 metres high, I can't tell. It has a fungal disease, and the risk of tree fall, as has occurred in a number of trees locally, is not insignificant as a consequence. The risk to life, I guess, certainly property, has got to be considered, and I'm disappointed that this has been ignored completely when we've raised it previously.
You have now reached 3 minutes, so if I could ask you to sum up, please.
Have I? I'll sum up. There are a number of risks that have been addressed, both to ourselves and to others. Our concern is that this build plans in some risks and damage to our property and concern for light and view. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much indeed. So the second speaker then is Mr. Matthew Jolly, who is supporting this application.
Chairman, Mr. Jolly is unable to be with us this evening, so he's asked for his statement to be read out on his behalf.
Okay.
It's a short statement, which goes as follows. I address the committee as the applicant and owner of 14 The Crescent. You can see from the planning officer's report that all laws, regulations and policies have been adhered to in my application. The application was deferred at the last committee pending further evidence, and that evidence has now been provided and is detailed in the report. The assessment of the 45-degree code and the elevation confirmations, coupled with the fact that the sunlight is never blocked, concludes that the proposed build is in line with planning and policy. The other objections raised by Mr. Sandler at the last meeting fall under building control and have also been addressed in the planning officer's report. Given the aforesaid, I therefore assume that the committee's decision will support that of Solihull's planning department, its planning officer and John Hallam. That ends a statement from Mr. Jolly.
Thank you very much. It's my responsibility to start the debate. The council's standing orders require me to move the motion. Although I am moving the motion, I am still undecided on how I will vote. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Councillor Grins, thank you. Could I ask a question really that was raised back to one of the officers? Mr. Sandler mentioned something about the location of the building being some 50 centimetres further forward, 1.5 metres forward rather than 1 metre forward. I struggled to understand the precise detail of that because it was quite quick the way he mentioned it, but I'd like to know if the officer has any comment on that, please.
The plans we have, but let's say for argument's sake that, sorry, my video's on. But let's say for argument's sake that the building is 0.5 metre further forward as suggested. If you refer back to the plans in the report pack, you'll see that it would still comply with the 45-degree rule to the 2 front windows, not the third, that's breached already. And again, you need to be aware of the slight increase in height in relation to these first floor windows. They're not ground floor windows. And again, the orientation, the garage is due north of number 16. So when you consider the passage of the sun throughout the day, there'll be no direct shadowing or loss of light as a result. So we're not aware of any errors in the plans, but even if there were to be a slight error, it would not be to the extent that it would be material to the assessment of this application.
Thank you for that. Can I invite any debate then from the members who would like to speak? I'm looking for Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chairman, on page 20 of the officer's report, it says that the proposal has the potential to impact upon the amenity of the adjacent property of number 16. Has the potential. That potential for me would be the staircase. To have people going up and down visiting Granny, maybe 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, 7 times a day, and maybe more. Maybe having a get-together with the family is going to have an impact, I believe, on that staircase, on the adjacent neighbour. It also mentions in the report about human rights and the Human Rights Act of 1998. Well, I do believe that there is a human right on Granny to have to climb that stairs in the winter, having to climb that stairs at different times during the day when there's frost on it or snow on it. I think that's very unfair to have a stairs to a granny flat outside the garage. I'll put it forward, Chairman, surely that stairs could be accommodated within one of the garages of those 3 garages. It could be done, and in my view, that should be a condition. I'm always in favour, and I take it very seriously, when people want to improve their property, I look on it that people are entitled to do that within reason, that it doesn't have a bearing impact on the resident. This particular application has, as the report says, the potential. And that potential will not be realized until the application is completed and the building work is done. So at this stage, Chairman, I have an open mind, but I'd like to hear some more from members about that potential. Because at the moment, I'm swaying not in favour of the application. I thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak, and I will listen to you and the members moving forward.
Councillor Hall-Allen.
Wasn't there somebody else before me? Never mind. Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, first of all, I think most people who probably visited this, as I did quite recently, before we saw it at the other meeting. And let's be honest, this is probably one of the most prestigious roads in the borough. It's absolutely beautiful, beautiful houses and very large houses. And generally speaking, I'm of a mind to support the application. However, Councillor Ryan, I think, has come up with a point. I mean, this property, okay, it's going to be a granny flat for as long as the granny is there, but ultimately it will probably be used for possibly somebody else long term. The odds are, without being too basic, it may well end up being a letting flat or something. I'm not sure. So I'm slightly concerned, though, and I do share Councillor Ryan's observation with this, you know, these steps outside. It does seem a little bit old-fashioned to me. I'm not too happy about that at all. I don't know if the officers can clarify, which Councillor Ryan's just asked, if somebody would like to see, is there a way that this can be put within one of the garages? I entirely support him in on this. The rest of it I would have no problem with whatsoever. There are a lot of large properties around there. I understand the people next door and probably a bit concerned. I don't think their privacy will be upset as much as all that, apart from what Councillor Ryan has just said. So I leave it open to the office perhaps to explain a little bit where we are with that, because I think it's a very good point. Thank you, Chairman.
Alan, would you like to comment on the outdoor staircase?
Certainly, Chair. You tonight have to determine this application, not what could potentially be an alternative proposal. If you have concerns over that proposed external staircase, you would need to be able to show that that is going to have any form of material harm in planning terms. Now, whether or not Granny wants to open down a set of stairs in the winter is up to Granny. That's not a planning consideration. However, potential overlooking, potential noise nuisance certainly would be. In terms of noise nuisance, well, it's an existing residential area. It's a small converted loft space. It wouldn't be unusual to hear the voices of people in people's gardens and properties, and I wouldn't have thought there'd be any material increase in the usage of the property as a result. So I doubt you could argue that. Then in terms of potential overlooking, that's perhaps the key issue. But as I've said in the report, that is next to number 16, where number 16 is 2-storey, so there's no direct sideways lateral overlooking. Yes, there'll be angled and oblique views across the garden, but that is something that you have in all residential settings where houses are located next to each other. And the staircase, in my eyes, wouldn't be designed as an external sitting out or gathering area. It is what it is. It's a staircase. So in my eyes, Chair, you would not have any substantive planning reasons to refuse that application based on harm to the neighbours, or indeed suggest alternatives are proposed instead.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. I've taken on board what Councillor Ryan has said about the staircase. I also picked up the point that Councillor Hall-Allen made in that it could be utilised for lettings at some time in the future. I have seen in previous applications and would like assurances that some kind of condition is put on should this be approved, and I'm undecided at this moment in time, that it can only be used by residents of the property and not used for external. Is there something that could be put in there, if you know what I mean, from something restricted to family use, if that be the case? I mean, we're calling it a granny flat. but it could be for a child when they become teenagers, study, gymnasium, who knows? But I don't want to see any application here, approved or otherwise, that could denigrate what is, and I agree with Councillor Allen, because Councillor Allen, because I've visited personally, it is one of the most prestigious roads in the borough, and anything that would denigrate that would certainly not. I would not be happy with. Can officers suggest a condition that could be applied from that point of view?
Chairman, if I can answer that question, please. And thank you for raising it, Councillor Grinsell. I wanted to clarify to you all that this granny annex could never be let out as a separate unit. And that's because we've already suggested a planning condition. It's on page 22 of your papers, and it would be the fourth condition, ancillary use only. The committee report, the page before on page 21, talks about that as well. And another observation in terms of the stairway, can I just remind members that this stairway in the building is located in the front garden. It's not in the back garden. And in terms of its position against the neighbour's building contains that staircase. The depth of the neighbour's house extends beyond it. So as a consequence, the staircase isn't protruding into any back garden area. It's very much self-contained in what I see to be, the front garden and maybe the alleyway between the front and the back. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else who wants to speak on this? Doesn't look like it to me. So shall we move to a vote? Some voice out to interrupt. No? Okay. If we could take...
Councillor Ryan's got his hand in the air, Chair.
Oh, right, okay. Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I do think it would be most reasonable. And, Chairman, I want to cast your mind back and try and refresh our memories as to what the applicant said at our previous meeting. He has, I understand it, but I stand to be corrected, of course, that the applicant gave the impression that they would be prepared to move the stairs internally. And I think it is most reasonable, and I could support the application if it was a condition that the stairs would be moved internally into one of the garages. And from my own building knowledge, which is, I could say, considerable, I would think that's the best place for the stairs. And it is certainly best for Granny, but I know that's not a planning matter. But as a councillor on the committee, these are the issues that I look at. I'm not a Puritan in terms of planning law and sticking rigid to the planning law and to all of the policies. We come to the table looking at the issues from a normal position of a local residence or a resident of the council of the borough. And I think it would be very reasonable of us to condition the application that the stairs be moved internally and the granny flat be accessed internally in the garage. And I could support it on that basis. But if that weren't the case, Chairman, then I may be in a minority of one. I could not support the application, but I could if the stairs was moved internally. Thank you, Chairman.
Norton.
Yeah, so the big issue in the debate at least seems to be the external staircase. And I mean, this kind of staircase isn't unusual in certain circumstances, like flats above shops or masonry access. It is perhaps a little unusual where it's an ancillary use to the existing building, but then it is an extension. So, I don't think it's an unreasonable suggestion. And I don't think, although the terminology is granny annex, that's beyond our remit. It's not necessarily going to be an elderly female person that lives there. It could be any member of the family. So I don't think we should concern ourselves with that particularly. And that's a matter for whoever ends up living there. The thing for me is we're here to determine this application. And I think, like Councillor Ryan, I would need clarification of whether it will be appropriate to condition in that way, because it's not part of the application as I can see it. The application before us seems sound from what I've heard so far in the debate and from the presentation. I think I'm happy to support it, but I don't think I need to be corrected, really. I don't think we can condition something at that level to that extent. I think there would have to be an alternative planning application, but subsequently or instead. But I would like some clarification.
Can I come back on that, please, Chair? Councillor McNaughton, you are quite correct. We couldn't impose a condition that sought changes of that extent to the application. So if the applicant were to consider an internal stairway, it would be a fresh amended submission.
Councillor Grinsall, Chairman.
Apologies, Councillor. Sorry, Mr. Hallam's just answered that question. I was going to suggest that perhaps we could put in an informative to the applicant, and that may pacify Councillor Ryan, as well as fit with the officer's recommendations.
So informative just says, would you mind doing this? Councillor Grinsall, is that the?
I'm waiting for officers to answer that question as well, Chair.
Chairman, I'm here on that. I'm afraid it wouldn't be possible, because the applicants, the first condition we have is the applicant has to build out this development in accordance with the approved plans, and to internalise the staircase would have an impact on the external appearance. So it would be creating an anomaly. He wouldn't be able to lawfully do both.
Thank you. So I think the position is quite clear. The plans are before us. The applicant has made the application, and we've got to determine it on that basis.
Councillor Goff's got his hand up, Chair. Sorry to interrupt.
Goff, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just need to inform you that I lost connection during the debate, so I will have to abstain from the vote.
Thank you. I also noticed Councillor Grinsall's page went blank on me, and there was a circular thing going round. So did you continue to have audio connection, Councillor Grinsall? I presume you did.
I haven't missed a thing, Chair.
Okay. Well, I missed your image, I'm afraid to say, for a few moments.
Probably preferable.
Couldn't possibly comment. Okay, so I think we have now, I think let's go to a vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Allen?
4.
4, thank you. Councillor Cole?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Goff? Abstain, thank you. Councillor Grinsall?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Holler?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Holt?
4.
Thank you. Councillor McNaughton?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Against?
Against. Thank you. Councillor Slater?
4.
Thank you. That's 7-4, Chairman, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Much. As we don't have any speakers on Kingshurst, the second item, I'd like to bring that in later. So I'd like to go to the Conker Lane application, item 3 on the agenda. If I could invite the officer, please, to introduce this to us.
Thank you. A determination as to whether approval of the local authority is required for the installation of an 18-metre lattice mast, 6 antennas, one 600mm dish, one 300mm dish, 3 equipment cabinets, and 1 meter cabinet in a secure compound measuring 5.2 by 8 meters, submitted for consideration. If I can just read you through the submitted plans now, please, Chair. Right, next slide. Now, the application of height of public open space is authority. That in itself isn't a material consideration, and it's land of green space in both local plan and the neighbourhood plan. You'll see there it's the compound is to be very close to the adjacent railway, and in particular to an overhead lattice gantry structure that exists. You'll see housing is located to the south, there's also to the north, and off plan there is also housing to the west, but there is sufficient separation distance between them all. Next slide, please. This is a zoomed in plan of the existing site. You'll see there running through the middle of the site is a grassed area. There's a worn footpath that runs along there as well. There's vegetation. The key and important trees are to be retained. A few self-set saplings and scrub and bushes and so on will have to come out, but nothing of significance that we have any objections to. You can see there the proximity to the railway line, and also to the north, the overhead lattice gantry structure. Can I have the next slide, please, Lee? There we go. This shows the compound, so sitting adjacent to the trees, and again in very close proximity to the railway and that gantry signal, that gantry structure. The trees in question are quite mature, they're quite dense, and in height they're up to approximately 16 meters, especially the largest tree to the north. Next slide, please. This is the site as existing. Next slide, please. Here is the mast. You'll see it's a lattice design. Now that's been chosen for 3 reasons. Firstly, it can be brought onto the site quite easily because it can be shipped in sections rather than, say, a standard monopole, which would have to come as a whole. That would be quite a difficult operation. It's a slimline lattice mast. That's the sort of mast that is often encouraged where it sits against a backcloth of trees, as we have here, because the lightweight lattice work does allow for a high degree of visual permeability. And thirdly, as I've referred to several times, it is viewed in the context of the lattice structure and sits close to the lattice structure of the railway gantry system. So in terms of design, officers' view is that the most appropriate solution has been chosen. Next slide, please. Now there's some photo montages from various viewpoints from residential areas. Now this one is from residential land to the northwest. Now if you look at the top left photo, you can see a gap in between 2 houses. The top right photo is the same photo, but with the image of the mast drafted in. Please remember this is indicative. There can be no guarantees, it's entirely accurate, but it gives you a rough idea, taking into account perspective, and shows the filtering effect of trees on the site. Next slide, please. A similar photo montage from elsewhere, this time from the northwest, looking back across the railway. Yes, it has been chosen so that the proposed mast is behind the lattice structure. You can see it on the right hand side photo, but even if this were produced from a different angle and the mast was, say, to the side, you would still see it against the large lattice gantry sign in the foreground. Again, indicative only. Next slide, please. This is taken from another housing area, this time to the south, looking back to the site. The arrow there on the right-hand side photo shows the mast behind the existing trees, again demonstrating the screening and filtering effect that the significant planting and vegetation around this site does have from housing viewpoints. I think there's one more photo montage. Here we go. This is taken from the, let's get my compass right, southwest, looking back to the site. The right-hand side photo faintly shows the mast, but again, it carries on the theme of filtering and screening provided by trees from residential areas. Next slide, please. Now, this is the construction plan. You can see the green hatched area is an area of temporary land protection that is proposed to be put in place during construction. And in terms of construction and access to the site, I can advise members that if this application is approved and is constructed, because it's council-owned land, the developers will have to enter into an agreement with the council in terms of access and maintenance, which will make sure that any damage is made good by the developer. And in terms of access as well, for future maintenance, I'm advised that there'll be no permanent access needed whatsoever. It will be across the existing surface as it currently is. And again, any damage to be made good. And it's envisaged that there'll be perhaps one, possibly two visits a year at most for maintenance. Next slide, please. Now, as is always the case with all mobile phone masts, there has to be a requirement for them. Otherwise, why would the developers apply? They wouldn't. Now, this shows the existing coverage in the area of 2G, 3G, and 4G, which is what this mast is to provide for. Ideally, the developers or the operators would like that whole map to be bright pink. That's indoor, dense, urban. Anything below that is below ideal and needs improving. There's certain areas there that are green, which means that you can only get coverage in car or outside, not in buildings. So in order for this to be acceptable in principle, would need to see the proposal improving that coverage. Next slide, please. Here we go. Most of the area is now pink. That's indoor, dense, urban area. So that shows there is a definite demonstrable requirement for this proposed mast in the area. Next slide, please. Now, as the report sets out, in order to provide that coverage, the developers or the operators need to find a suitable site for the mast. In this particular instance, the cell search area is shown on this plan, and that is governed by the position of neighbouring masts or cells. And then within this area is where the operators have had to identify a site to meet their coverage requirements. Now, the application site, if you look at that plan, towards the bottom of the oval, about a quarter of the way up, you can see from left to right a green swathe of land. Now, that swathe of land is the open space, and there's three key sections to it, split by roads, upon which the application is proposed. And now, if you follow that green swathe all the way to the right, to the railway, that is where the application site is. So it's tucked to one side of the open space, against the railway, against the trees, which is certainly far preferable to locating it more centrally in that area. Now, you'll notice looking at that, the majority of the search area is fairly high density residential streets, and it's difficult to find sites to accommodate a mast of the required height and type required in that area, as is always the case. Now, within this cell search area, the applicants have considered 18 different sites. They've all been ruled out for various reasons, due to not providing coverage, or will have a greater visual impact, or there's no consent from the owner, whether it's Network Rail or a private landowner. And they've come to the conclusion that the proposal that you have before you is the most appropriate site and most appropriate design solution to meet their coverage requirements. And that, as set out in the report, is a material consideration that can and often does outweigh any limited degree of visual harm that members may associate with this. If I can go on to the next slide, please, Lee. We've got a series of photographs now. Now this is taken from Google. The arrow shows the approximate location of where the mast will be, nestled against the tree line and in close proximity to the railway and the infrastructure associated with that. Next one, please. A view from another angle again shows the gantry on the railway and the railway line. I should also note that the railway line is on quite a steep embankment, so it's at a high level to the application site. So therefore, although the gantry sign itself or the gantry structure itself isn't as tall as that proposed, when you take into account the difference in land levels, the two are certainly far more comparable. Next slide, please. Here we go. This is a photograph across the site which shows the general backcloth of trees that the proposal will enjoy that stretch out along the side of the railway. Now there may be one more slide. This is the overhead gantry as viewed from the other side of the railway from the residential areas. Is that it? Is there another one? That's the end of the show. So the main issues in determining this application are whether there's a technical requirement for the proposed mast, whether a suitable assessment of the area has been undertaken to justify the siting of the proposal, whether the proposal will be harmful to the character and appearance of the area, the impact of the proposal upon public open space, and whether any harm caused by the proposal is outweighed by the requirement for the mast, the lack of any more suitable alternatives, and the attempts that have been made to lessen the visual impact of the proposal as far as practicable. Other material considerations relate to health, residential amenity, and also highway considerations. All of these issues are explored in detail in the report, and the recommendation set out in the report is one of approval subject to conditions. So as before, there is an update note on this application, so if I can just remind members of that, and for the benefit of viewers at home, I'll read it out in its entirety. Okay, a further 6 emails of opposition have been received. Insofar as the matters raised have not been previously raised and summarised in the main report, the additional objections are summarised as follows. The site is too near to people's homes. It will discourage use of the local green space. It will devalue properties. Greater publicity should have been undertaken. Mobile reception in the area is fine and therefore no need for the mast. The proposed access track will cut across the most usable area of the grass, and there is lack of detail about this. No information about future repair or maintenance requirements have been provided. And members are advised that the recommendation remains one of approval, subject to conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a speaker this evening, Jane Ackroyd.
Ackroyd, yes, thank you.
Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
So you've got 3 minutes to address us. If you could try and confine your representations to us within that period, I'd be very grateful.
I will, and sorry for the brevity, everyone. Okay. The forum's position is that the quality and detail of this proposal fails to meet the standard required to satisfy policy requirements regarding siting and design, that development is not materially harmful, that the need or benefits clearly outweigh the loss, and to demonstrate very special circumstances. The overriding concern evidenced in the 25+ objections is the impact on highly valued local green space. LGS has protection equivalent to Greenbelt. Members, please note the appeal case quoted is not comparable. It was not LGS nor contrary to a neighbourhood plan policy. The assertion is that the installation will not be unduly harmful. Residents disagree. It will significantly harm the appearance, character and enjoyment of the amenity. The full height of the installed mast is 21 metres. Continually repeating 18 metres is misleading. Towering well above all existing trees, it will be the only man-made intrusion visible within the LGS natural environment. At ground level, the so-called small footprint totals 19 metres long, surrounded by secure fencing. That's not small. The site is immediately alongside a well-used walking track. This track is not ancillary to the central open parkland. It's an important part of leisure space within an area of trees. See the photo. The track is very narrow where it passes the site. It will need cutting back heavily to allow vehicle access. The arboricultural report indicates removal of trees and shrubs that, when in full leaf, completely screen the railway infrastructure. Removal risks exposing not only this, but also the railway signal gantry currently invisible from the LGS. Access for construction, servicing and security protection is very challenging. It will affect the Conker Lane pedestrianised path and require infrastructure traversing the whole of the LGS site. No details provided how this will be done and managed. Needs and benefits. Beyond a generalised map showing improved area coverage, there's no detail of the specific need or technical requirements determining this particular site, and most importantly, why the search area boundary has been defined where it is, which of course determines potential locations. Siting and design. Generic statements are made such as, the proposed height of the mast is unavoidable, given that it is to support the antennas of 2 operators and for coverage reasons. In this and other areas, more robust justification is required given the especially sensitive site context and need to demonstrate very special circumstances. For example, a signal analysis showing the impact of a lower mast or to substantiate rejection of alternative sites. In short, Chairman, members, we ask, does the detail available convince you that policy requirements are met, that there's no more suitable location, that every attempt has been made to lessen impact, that the planning conditions will control installation and minimise adverse impact on such highly valued LGS? The Forum is not convinced. We urge you to refuse the application. We stand ready to work with the Council and the applicant to help clarify need and how this can be best fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's my responsibility to start the debate. The Council's standing orders require me to move the motion. Although I am moving the motion, I am still undecided on how I will vote. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr. Grinsell, thank you very much. Question for the officer from me. The term very special circumstances was used by the Speaker. Can I have some clarification as to the whether or not that's an accurate statement in law, given this isn't Greenbelt?
Chair, yeah, I can come back to that. Yeah, that centres around the location of the site on public open space. Now, there's 2 policies relevant to this. One of them is within the Solihull local plan, and the other one is in the Knoll, Dorridge and Bentley Heath neighbourhood plan. Now, the one in the Solihull local plan is policy P20 that seeks to retain existing open space where it contributes to amenity and open space functions. This is, however, unless the proposal complies with one of 2 identified criteria, the second of which being the need or benefits of the development outweigh the loss. Now, the report sets out in this instance that the loss is minimal and the need for the mast and the failure to demonstrate any more suitable alternatives or alternative locations is considered to be a need that clearly outweighs the loss. Now, moving on to the neighbourhood plans, policy VC4 in a similar vein seeks to protect open space. They use slightly different terminology though. They say, unless it can be demonstrated there are very special circumstances in which to make an exception. Now, the Speaker made comparisons between the protection of green space, very special circumstances, and green belt, very special circumstances, and perhaps she's in her rights to do that. But I would say that in the green belt, the erection of telecommunication masts does happen. They do have to go in rural areas, a lot of which is green belt. and clearly they have to be justified to be built in the green belt. And one of the usual justifications to build a mast in the green belt is to demonstrate very special circumstances, and that very special circumstance is commonly that there are no more suitable sites located outside of the green belt. So using that sort of approach, I'm content that very special circumstances do exist to allow development against policy VC4 on this green space. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Halala.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for mentioning special circumstances, because I find myself very concerned about this application. Our forum is extremely active, as you all know, and I have a great deal of respect for them all. With respect to the officer, you mentioned there were no suitable sites. So what other sites have actually been considered, please, Mr. Hallam, if that's possible? I am concerned about this, members. Am I right in saying, though, that, I mean, I'm no technician, but they do have to be in a certain sequence, do they not, these masts? Is this one of the difficulties that we have when they're being considered? And we had one a few weeks ago, didn't we, which we weren't too happy about either. I mean, the technical need is there. I wouldn't agree with all those that are saying we don't need an improvement in our masts. I think we do. I think you said this is for Vodafone and O2, and as I have Vodafone, I don't know whether I need to declare interest, but possibly not. But I understand that's right. They do have to be in a certain position, a little bit like some of the electricity enormous pylons that we have throughout the country. But I'm just a bit concerned that this is this area is very attractive and used an awful lot by the locals. I'm prepared to accept it's a reasonable distance from properties, but at the same time, and of course it's bang next to almost on the railway, not quite, but so in some ways it is out of the way. But if you're at that lower level and down the path that way, you can see it quite easily. So it isn't going to be at all welcome. And also, Mr. Hallam, I think somewhere in the text it mentions about the colour. I think we had the discussion earlier on, but I think that's something that's quite important. I mean, personally, I think it should be grey or something like that. But I mean, what I want to, you always end up when we've had discussions, Chair, on these necessities. What sort of other sites have been considered? That would be helpful, I think, to know, bearing in mind this is next door to a ward that I look after. Thank you.
Chair. Okay. There's always a very limited scope within or area of land within which a mast can be located. As is the case here, there's an existing network which has an existing amount of masts in various locations. So to provide coverage to any flat spot area, the mast has to be located in the right space to do that, but also not too far away or too close to a neighbouring cell, because masts too close to each other can cause interference and cause the system to crash or the network to crash. So because of that, mobile phone operators have radio engineers that will be able to identify, based on those issues, an area of land within which they need to locate a new site. Now that is what I showed on my slide, if you remember the oval. And if you remember, most of that is characterized by high density residential development. And it's always difficult to find a site along residential roads. And I will always encourage operators to site as far away from houses as they possibly can. And within this search area, there's limited scope to locate away from houses. The site is one of them. A few more have been considered. In fact, there's 18 sites as set out in the report that have all been considered but rejected, mostly near to residential areas, but not all. There's some fields, for instance, one of them, I forget which side it is, let's have a look. Site number 5, Four Ashes Road, Field. But the developers or the operators advise the location is too far removed from the search area to provide the required level of coverage and capacity in which it would impact upon the neighbouring base station sites in the wider networks. That's the point I made. You know, it's in the wrong location, it's too close to other masts, therefore they have to discount it. So they've done a very, very thorough job of looking at potential sites, and certainly as officers we've looked as well. And I personally cannot see any more superior sites having regard to their needs and their constraints and the reasons for discounting the sites that they have set out. But don't get me wrong, the Masters proposed it won't be invisible, it will have an impact, but that is always the case. The key thing to assess with applications of this type is to decide which site, which design is going to have the least worst impact. This, members, I am firmly of the view that it will have the least worst impact, and guidance on that sort of assessment, i.e. where there is a degree of visual harm, it can be outweighed by other considerations, for instance, the need, the lack of alternative sites, is where I've made reference in the report to an appeal decision. Now, I didn't set out to say that was an identical circumstances to this, as the speaker raised, but it sets out the principle of other considerations outweighing harm. That is the view I think members should take. Coming back to the the colour of the mast, it's proposed to paint the cabinets green, and we've got a condition to say that we need to approve details of colour. So I think it's fair to say the cabinets and the fencing should be green, because that's where it's at low level and where you see it against the foliage of the trees and bushes, etc. But the mast, I would suggest it be left grey, because when seen against the skyline, that is usually the better colour for this sort of thing. But if members are minded to approve, I'm happy to leave it in your hands if you'd rather see it green. I can see benefits of there when you see it against the trees. It's just a balancing exercise, but in my view, a grey coloured mast would be more appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, thank you for that explanation. The word I should have been looking for is network, isn't it? Because this is what we're looking at, a network of masks. I'm still a bit concerned about it, but Mr. Hallam, thank you very much indeed. That helped a lot. I know it's in the text, and we keep re-looking at it. You know, we can't walk around all the sites, I suppose, but I will rest my case at the moment as to which way I may vote. But there are concerns locally, and I do respect the worries that local residents in particular obviously do have. At the same time, I also know, Chair, that this is going to be essential. People do want these phones, of course we do. So I rest my case at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. These applications are always very sensitive to the residents who are having these masks thrust upon them. We've had several that we've actually looked at, and the one that's actually quoted on page 110 is the one that's actually in the ward that I represent, and that was that mast was on the edge of a road right next to houses and near to a school, and all of these things were taken into consideration. And we, as a planning committee, we unanimously rejected it. However, when it went to appeal, and what the planning inspector said is written on page 110. And I think that because the government is intent on rolling out all of these sort of masts and enhancing the telecommunications and everything else, and of course, what's during the COVID epidemic, we've seen how useful all of this electronic equipment is, and how it may very well be needed much more in the future as people continue to work from home and do all those sorts of things. So whilst I can appreciate how Jane Ackroyd and her residents feel about this and sympathise with them, I think that practically what will happen, we could refuse it, but I think they will take it to appeal, and I think they will win the appeal. But thank you, that's my observations on it.
Councillor Grinsell and then Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with everything that Councillor Allen said. We've had many of these before us, and I think the one thing that I think Councillor Allen possibly missed on was that what we had to see in previous applications, we thought long and hard about the appearance of them. If I take this one as it stands, I actually, in this particular place, I actually prefer, I don't like any of them, but I prefer this lattice style framework, which will always give you a view beyond the background beyond that, whether that be sky, whether that be embankment, or whether it be trees, shrubs, etc. So if the residents had seen what we've had to see previously, I think they may have a slightly different view. I'll never have a totally different view, but I actually think that this particular lattice style is preferable to what we have seen before us here on this committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's not an easy one. Is it in an ideal location? Well, no, it's not in an ideal location. But I think the question is there an ideal location within the area of technical need? And I'm not convinced that there's a better location. Unfortunately, it probably is the best location given the alternatives discussed in the paper. Provided the search area is correct, which I've got no reason to believe isn't the case. I think the thing that concerns me the most is that the conditions don't seem to include an access and construction method statement requirement, which for this particular location I think would be quite welcome. I share Councillor Ackwood's concerns there. I realise it is Solihull Council land, but I think if that was there, it will provide some reassurance to people that would happen. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but I think that would reassure us all and make it a little bit more comfortable to accept this today. I agree with Councillor Grinsell, the lattice style in this circumstance and in other circumstances really is preferable in terms of visual intrusion. And with the colour, yeah, and cabinets green, yes, absolutely. I can see the argument for it being grey in the sky, the actual lattice structure. However, below the tree line, that would be visually intrusive. So, I mean, is it too complicated to suggest that it could be green up to just below the tree line, or is that a bit too much? That's my.
Can I come back to a couple of points there, please, Chair?
Please do, yes.
Okay, well, in terms of colour, I suppose it is doable, but would that be beneficial? I doubt it. I think that could potentially draw the eye to it more if it's a split colour, half and half. I mean, ultimately, it's in members' gift to decide what colour they think is most preferable. If you are minded to approve, I personally though think that just one single colour and grey being the most appropriate. I mean, coming on to the point you made previously, Councillor McNaughton, about construction method statement. Well, as you know, it's council-owned land, and not only do they need planning permission, they would also need to enter into an agreement with the council, and that agreement would include details of construction and future maintenance. I've been told that during the construction phase, there's an agreement that suggests that before any works commence, a photographic schedule of condition of the land and access routes will be made. A temporary trackway will be laid from the hard standing path to the mast site to a compound which will be temporarily on the site, also located on a temporary trackway hard surface. Upon completion of the construction phase, the land will be reinstated to the conditions shown in the photographic scheduled. The type of trackway used will be governed by the time of year and ground condition on site, and it goes on. So there is control. And then also for future maintenance, the agreement will say that any future maintenance or inspections conducted that are not on foot will require prior notification, including details of what is proposed and which will require approval by the council before they commence. These will all include a pre. Any damage will be made good by the mast company for the reasonable satisfaction of the council. So that's all covered elsewhere outside of the planning. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Grinsell and then Alan, I'd like to try and wrap this up now towards a vote soon, please.
Very briefly, Chairman, we were told in presentation, and I'm purely referring to the colour scheme, we were told that there was a high embankment that was a very large majority of this potential column. So I'm going to agree.
So could you just repeat that, Councillor Grinsell?
We were told that there was a very high embankment beyond the column in front of the stretch that goes over the railway that sort of negated a lot of its height. So therefore, if it were, and I'm with Councillor McNaughton, I think green would be a preferable one for the majority, certainly the majority of the height, but silver would clash against the green shrubs behind it, in my view.
I understand, thank you. Councillor Holland.
Chairman, actually, I was just about to agree with Councillor Grinsell. At least I think I've caught up what he's saying. And I think the bottom should be green, but I think it look a bit odd if we go too far up. It look a bit silly. I'm not quite sure if we're agreeing or we're not, but I'm happy with the bottom half staying green. And I must admit, if you walk around there, the train's literally above you. So, of course, it is a steep embankment around there, just a bit further across from where this is actually going, but it's not far away. But anyway, we're actually agreeing now, though, are we not, on the colour, Mr. Hallam? I think we are doing. So I think that's perhaps, it can't be a separate vote, Chair, but I think we should agree. I would suggest that we do the green at the bottom and around the box and so on, and the rest grey.
Chair, if this helps, we are suggesting a condition, which is condition number 2. So prior to its first use, the monopole and all ground-based equipment shall be painted a colour agreed in writing with the LPA. We could amend that to specify that it shall be green for the lower portion and grey for the higher portion, for us to agree exactly where the changeover point is, if members do wish.
Richard, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm not too sure what to do about the colour. I think it's probably occupying too much of our time. It's one of those things I would have thought that we should just leave it to the officers in their professional judgment as to what should be the case. I mean, to say certain colours should be apportioned between different parts of it, I mean, to me it seems, how do I deal with that? Do we have an agreement on that? I don't know. What's the meeting's view about this? Officers. Councillor McNaughton.
I was just going to say, I think officers have had a steer from the discussion, and I'd be happy to leave it at that.
I'll be happy as well to leave it with officers, Chair.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, but I'd like you to speak perhaps to the forum as well, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to a vote then, shall we, please?
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
4,
4. Thank you. Councillor Cole?
4,
Thank you. Councillor Goff?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Grinsell?
4.
Thank you. Councillor O'Allen?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Holt?
4.
Thank you. Councillor McNaughton?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Against.
Against. Thank you. And Councillor Slater?
4.
Thank you. That's 8 for, Chairman, and 1 against.
Thank you very much. So if we could go to Needler's End Lane, please.
Yeah, if I may, just before we go to the presentation, just to bring to members' attention that we have had a request from a local resident regarding a possible deferral of this application this evening. And it's important we bring that to members' attention. The request relates to a small number of letters to approximately 10 residents relating to this application being presented to committee today. And we were notified on Friday of last week that there was a small IT glitch that meant those letters weren't sent to those people that had previously objected to the application. Officers were able to action that on Monday and made contact with all of the residents that were affected by that, and offered a 24-hour extension on the request to speak and the provision of any written comments to be read out of committee this evening. Councillor DeSicchio and the speaker who is registered today were part of helping bring that to our attention, and for that we thank them. We say officers have done all that we feel we were able to do to ensure that everyone had the opportunity to partake in the committee this evening. All objections were considered as part of this application. I don't want members to feel that anyone's been disadvantaged in that respect. They've all been fully presented and considered by officers as part of this report this evening. And as a result, officers feel that there hasn't been any prejudice or any issues caused for anyone wishing to partake or have their say on this application. Partly, of course, because any comments raised through planning committee are to reflect written objections already made as part of the application. There's not an expectation that anything new is to be raised as part of planning committee and the verbal presentations. But obviously we wanted to bring that to your attention. If members feel that there should be a deferral of this application, then we would invite members to consider that and vote on it, obviously in accordance with the Orange Book.
I rather thought it was my decision as to whether or not it was to be deferred.
Our understanding of the Orange Book is that if it's members' decision, it would be the committee as a whole's decision. I think there would be a vote on that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Can I ask? I can see Councillor Grinsell's hand in the air, and I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Grinsell. But can I ask the question whether Councillor DeSicchio continues to be of the opinion that the matter should be adjourned? Because in his email to the committee of the 14th of September, he criticised the short period to prepare a case and thought that the planning committee chairman should consider delaying consideration of the planning application. But I think subsequent to that email, John Parkhouse was able to put himself forward as the speaker who's going to object, and he's down to speak to us tonight. And he's obviously objecting, but he was a gentleman who was specifically affected by not being notified. So can I ask whether Councillor DeSicchio continues to request an adjournment, or whether he's withdrawn that?
I'm unable to confirm or speak on behalf of Councillor DeSicchio on that point. I'm aware that he did request that earlier in the week, but obviously since then Mr. Parkhouse and Councillor DeSico have both provided, have both registered to speak. Councillor DeSico has provided a written statement for this evening as well. It doesn't reference it within his written statement, request to defer.
Okay,
but I don't want that to be perceived as me saying he has withdrawn that. I don't know, and I couldn't.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I think for transparency, I'd like to share with the committee the fact that Sheila Cooper, a lady from Berkswell, has emailed in and has said in her email of the 16th of September that she this morning received 2 calls from deeply concerned residents living close to the proposed development. She understood that the committee are due to vote on it this evening. Residents living close to the proposed development who have objected have not been kept informed by SMBC of the passage of the application through the planning process. In particular, as objectors, they have not received information to enable them to make representations at at the meeting tonight. In view of the legitimate complaints, I respectfully ask the chairman to defer the decision on the proposed application. The difficulty with Sheila Cooper's email is it doesn't refer to the people that she says are complaining about their inability to address the committee. So I don't know who they are, but I'm told by officers that everyone who has objected, all of their information about their objections is fed through into this application. So whilst Sheila Cooper's email concerns me, it doesn't come from the horse's mouth. It doesn't come from the people who say they object. And it may well be that they are part of the application process. I'm concerned that she says, you know, in an email of the 16th, it's today, isn't it, that this objection is made by her. So I'm concerned about that. Councillor Holland, do you want to say something? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Just the policy of what you're saying, you know, should we defer this, bearing in mind the concerns? I don't know how many people have had a look round here. I spent some time there yesterday having.
You've gone back on mute, Councillor Holland.
Put it on. Sorry. Attach it. Sorry, Chair. Anyway, I think we should seriously consider deferring it, because I'm a bit concerned that perhaps people haven't been able to put in sufficient. I mean, how many people have we had ejected? Maybe we should ask that question first. I mean, I'm making an assumption that it's the people in the road nearby, and it's quite, well, the road, Needles End Lane, is a very long road with very mixed properties, very nice properties, but there certainly is a mixed road. So I think we should consider it, Chair.
Chairman, may I just interject, just to give members the full facts whilst you consider how you wish to move forward. But clearly, if you do view it that a deferment is necessary, one unintended consequence could be, and may well be, that the applicant choose to appeal against non-determination. So we are running on an extension of time, but that closes soon after the committee meeting. So, as I say, to defer tonight, that option is opened out to the applicant.
It would probably be said of the objectors that they might feel that they haven't had a fair hearing either. So it's very difficult to weigh it up, isn't it? But one thing's for sure: there's been an administrative mistake by ourselves. So we are on the hook, I think, with this. Councillor Grinsell?
Well, I think just summed up about what I was going to say. We all know, and we see it on social media. Have you had any posts recently? COVID has delayed the post. The council has admitted that there was a glitch. I do not consider that an email or Councillor DeSico saying something on Monday of this week, and it's only Wednesday, and that's Councillor DeSico, who is probably all over it. This gives an opportunity for further objections to come forward, potentially, from residents. So, and you know, I don't like being hit over the head with a blunt stick as suggested, and I can see that the applicant's agent has got their hand in the air, but I would propose deferral at this moment in time.
Councillor Cole.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think I have to agree with both Diana and Councillor Grinsell. And in the interest of fairness, I think we should defer this this motion.
Norton.
I think really it depends on. I mean, we heard from Mark Andrews that an individual attempt to contact each of the people affected by this problem has been made and has been successful. If that's the case, I think that may have reversed the problem. But I'd like that to be reiterated if it is the case. If it is the case, I don't think we do have a need to defer. But if it's not the case, then I think there is a need to defer. So I'm not persuaded either way yet. I'd like to know for sure whether that's the case. Because if it is, I don't think there's a problem. If everyone's been spoken to individually who is affected, that's the same as them being sent.
Thank you, Councillor. I can confirm that we emailed and/or telephoned all of those people that we identified to give us best opportunity as possible to notify them of the situation.
Norton, your hands in the air.
Yeah, sorry. In which case, I would say the people who have been telephoned successfully have had the problem negated. I would say the people who've been emailed and given the timescale haven't necessarily, if they haven't replied to that. So if there are people outstanding that potentially haven't been kept informed, then that is a problem. So, but I am also concerned about the risk of determination being taken out of our hands through non-determination. And I would say that's
Here, Chairman, don't we?
Councillor Allen, what did you say?
Some help. I mean, I listened to what Kim said, and not very often about non-determination. I wonder. I'm trying to think when our next meeting is. Offhand, I can't think. Can't be long off, can it? 4 weeks.
Councillor Ryan, I think you wanted to speak, did you?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'll be guided by you, Chairman, if you feel that the application from the information that you have received should be deferred. I will support that, because we're always challenged by fear of one degree or another. The fear of non-determination, the fear of appeal, the fear of this and the fear of that. And we're trapped like rabbits in the headlights. And I think on natural justice, if the chairman feels it should be deferred, I will support the chairman. If the chairman feels it should go ahead and we should determine the application, I will also support that. But it's what the chairman decides now for me is important.
Chair, Gemma has had her hand up so long it's fallen off.
So sorry, Chair.
I think that sort of going beyond. At the moment, we're sort of deciding whether or not to hear this application. Gemma, presumably, is for the applicant, are you?
I am, but I would just like to raise that, as far as I'm aware, there's been 16 objections to this application, and the notice was removed from outside the property, and therefore people were given longer than normal to object. So they, as I understand it, they were allowed to object up until 4 p.m. today. So people have had plenty of time to object to this application, and we would like it very much to be heard tonight. And my client has instructed me to appeal against non-determination if it's not heard tonight.
Well, that probably makes me all the more determined, in my opinion, as chairman, to adjourn it, because I think I'm not going to be put in a position whereby someone's saying to me, make a decision or else.
I'm not saying make a decision or else, but this has already had an extension.
I'm not hearing you anymore. I'm not hearing you anymore. You're not in a position here to talk, because we haven't started hearing this application. We're talking about whether or not we're hearing the application yet, and I've given you some indulgence by listening to you, but that's as far as it goes now. As far as I'm concerned, the email I have, still fresh today, says that 2 people feel that they have not had an opportunity to deal with this matter properly. I'm frankly, I'm not sure whether it's my decision or whether it's the committee's decision, because I rather felt that matters of procedure were strictly within the ambit of the chairman. But I've been told by Mark Andrews that this is a committee decision. So I think I do need some clarification about this as to whether or not it's my unilateral decision or whether it's a decision that we have to vote on. And I'd like some advice on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just say, because the matter is now in the public arena, therefore it will be a committee decision. So it would be helpful if the committee did vote on this for the Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go to a vote then, please.
Point of order, Chairman, you need to have a proposer and a seconder for deferment and then the vote.
Okay. So can I have a proposer for deferment, please?
Proposed.
By Councillor Grinsell.
Seconded.
By Councillor Holloran. If you could have a name vote, please.
Councillor Allen.
For. Sorry.
Is that for deferral?
Oh, I've gone. Yes, isn't that what?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cole.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Goff.
Against.
Against. Thank you. Councillor Grinsell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Holloran.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Holt. Councillor Holt, I didn't catch that. For. Thank you. Councillor McNaughton.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you. Councillor Ryan. Councillor Ryan.
Chairman, for.
For. Thank you. And Councillor Slater. Councillor Slater. Sorry, Councillor Slater, I didn't catch that.
Against.
Against. Thank you. That's 6 for, Chairman, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if we can go to item 10, Kingshurst Village Centre.
Thank you, Chairman. Lee, can I ask that you put the PowerPoints up? Thank you. Okay, whilst that loads, I'd like to, oh, thank you, Lee, that's super. Bear with me. Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this application seeks it's an outline planning application with all matters reserved except for access. And the proposal is for the demolition of the existing local centre and the development of a new mixed-use local centre, including up to 86 residential dwellings, up to 1,200 square metres of retail uses, and up to 1,700 square metres of healthcare and community uses. That also includes open space, landscaping, parking, and associated infrastructure. So Lee, can you take us to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this plan demonstrates where the Kingshurst Village Centre is. It's in the north of the borough, and is very much considered within an awful lot of policies that we have. The local plan, which was adopted in 2013, identifies Kingshurst Village Centre as an area where regeneration is particularly needed. Can I take the next slide, please, Lee? Thank you. Again, that provides you an aerial shot. So there's a surprising amount of green space and green infrastructure around it, but notably, immediately adjacent to the site, to the south is Kingshurst Park, and to the east, that big square of land would be the playing fields associated with Kingshurst Primary School. Next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. This slide, members, shows you the existing village centre as it is now. And within that, you can see the main village centre in the middle, which almost looks like an upside down V. That's where the existing retail and commercial areas are. The long building to the south, that houses the Kingshurst Library, as well as some community areas. Going to the east, to the right-hand side in that boundary, you'll see there's a number of buildings. The one furthest north occupies a youth club. Then we have a series of residential dwellings, and the building at the bottom corner, adjacent to the access, that is the GP surgery. The site to the west, there is St Barnabas Church, so that is to the northwest. St Barnabas Church includes a vicarage adjacent to it, and then that great big green space, that was the former pub, Mountford Pub. Next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. Okay, and this plan then shows you the OS layout of those existing buildings. So as you can see, it's quite a complicated arrangement and almost a little cluttered and difficult to get around. Next slide, thank you, Lee. Okay, so in terms of visuals, I've got a number of photographs to show you. The ones you're seeing now are all views taken from outside the village, looking directly into it. So the one on the top right-hand side, that's a view taken from the south of the village, from Gilson Way, looking towards the village development. Then the photograph in the middle, that shows St Barnabas Church, looking from the opposite end, which is the northwest. And then the bottom slide shows the former pub site, which is now vacant land. The next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. Again, sorry if that's difficult to interpret, but another series of slides that show the appearance of, again, from the external views of the village. One that I'd like to point to is on the right-hand side. It's the second one from the top. And that visual, that photograph, shows the existing views taken from behind the village centre and its shopping parade. So essentially, what you get is the servicing yard and all its bins and associated paraphernalia with that, and beyond it are masonettes leading up to 2 meters high. So it is quite a poor outlook for those shops, and again it's very inward looking. The village as it stands has very little integration with the wider community. The next slide please, Lee. Thank you. Again, these are some photographs taken from inside the village centre and its shopping precinct. Built in the 1960s, obviously urban design was very different then. And as I've shared, this is an inward-looking development. But with that come difficulties, which I think the bottom photographs show. And the next slide again, Lee, please. This is taken from the rear side of the parade, which is basically the interface to the community. In my mind, there's no overlooking. I wouldn't feel safe walking through those alleyways. And again, time has moved on, so there is a very clear need in my mind for the village to be to be regenerated as we're looking to now. Again, the next slide, please, Lee. So what I'd like to show you, this is an illustrative plan. I shared with you at the start that this proposal seeks only for members to determine matters of access. And again, you'll know that the reserved matters will then be for future determination, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. But this master plan demonstrates how the amount of development proposed in the title of its development scheme, how it may be set out. So what a contrast. This layout demonstrates that the perimeter block design is included. It demonstrates a new road layout, and again it provides a much more legible setting out of community and retail uses, and those are located on the northeast corner where the purple and yellow blocks are. The next slide please. Thank you. Now again, for matters of clarity and detail, there are a series of slides now which show the technical details required for the changes to the junctions around the village centre. These are detailed in your report at pages 29 and 31. And again, if you want more detail behind those, then our highway engineer can help provide that. But in the broadest of senses, some junctions have widened to allow buses to manoeuvre and go by, and a good many junctions are we have raised tables introduced, which also provides that visual stop and that physical stop to to keep the village safe. So Lee, if you just skip through the following slides, thank you. These are the junctions, and there's another one. Thank you, and another one. And the next. Thank you. And that returns me to the master plan. Now, to reach this master plan, obviously the applicant, who is the council, has looked at the existing layout of the site, and they've very much drawn together the evidences and the benefits, the opportunities within this site that it provides. Something I'd like to draw your attention to is that quite clearly we have an east-west access where the main vehicular movements go. But a rationale behind this scheme has been very much to incorporate the park and to use the existing park to draw people up into the village centre to the north of the site. And to do that, this demonstrates, it's illustrative of course, it may change, but a possibility would be to introduce a treed boulevard running north to south, which is very much designed with pedestrians and cyclists in mind. So the pedestrians dominate this proposal. And an existing series of open spaces, which you see running up, are very much connected by that layout. The next slide, please. Thank you. So again, how did the designers get to that scheme? Essentially, they've looked at the existing drivers in the village centre, which you'll see here: the school, the church, the existing retail park, the vacant site, and the community hubs. That being the community facilities. And the next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. They've looked at the land uses of what the existing land uses provide and how could they be replaced and made better to better suit today's economic and social environment. And the next slide, thank you. This one, again, I'd like to draw your attention to. I've touched on it slightly, but this shows the natural constraints of the site. So it pinpoints where existing, landscaped areas are. In particular, I know we won't be able to read this, but that orange arrow directed from south to north, that actually shows that there's a 2 metre change in level across the site, going uphill from the park to the north. And again, that is something that has had to be given, very clear guidance on how that would be dealt with in any design, including obviously drainage. And the next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. This one demonstrates an existing tree survey, looking at the quality trees and how they should be retained. The next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. Again, I was talking to you earlier. This slide demonstrates the movement framework which is envisaged. And again, the primary routes which are existing, and that is Overslade Road to the west on the left-hand side, and Gilson Way to the right, to the east. Now, there's absolutely no changes in their geometry, but how the road network in between that land is then put into place demonstrates primary and secondary routes, which again help enforce those pedestrian and active travel connections. And the next slide, please. Thank you. Again, this slide, I like this slide. It shows the public realm, and I mentioned earlier about trying to link the existing open spaces, and again, to improve legibility on that, it gives a real opportunity to provide additional planting. As you can see, they run from the north to the south. Also, of course, is the additional street trees that I mentioned, and again, throughout the site, the pockets of public realm have been looked at with real care. The next slide, please. Thank you. This is the drainage strategy. Now, whilst this is indicative, it's important to know that a strategy could be put in place which would meet our policy requirements. So it is very much centred around sustainable drainage, porous floors, porous, surfaces, sustainable swales and suds, and biotechnic elements, which is behind the proposed commercial units. The next slide, thank you. We're nearly there, members. This slide provides a potential or a possible phasing plan. Again, we have conditions around that. And next slide, thank you. This shows building heights. Again, it's only indicative, but there's no aspiration to go above 3 stories, and that would very much be just where the commercial hub is adjacent to the school. Elsewhere, the residential development is is mostly 2-storey. And the next slide. Okay, that gives a mix of uses throughout. And then I think finally, the next slide again, thank you. And finally, this is an illustrative diagram of, well, axonometric of how that layout might appear in the future. And the very last slide to see, thank you, Lee, is there. Now, what I would like to share before I leave you is that this scheme is policy compliant. And again, from my point of view, it's an absolute delight to be able to present this to you. I'd like to share with you the public benefits. Essentially, Solihull, the site responds to the Solihull Council Plan, which identifies Kingshurst as an area for redevelopment, and that is intended to happen before 2025. It's drawn out in the Solihull's economic recovery plan relating to COVID-19, and also it builds from the climate change emergency statement that the council has issued last year. In terms of public benefits, conditions in your plan require, for example, a new cycle link between Meriden Drive and Chester Road. There would be park improvements, which provide more apparatus and seating areas in the park. The scheme brings over 80 jobs. And again, a condition in your papers requires that those employment and training scheme is put in place alongside that. And it very much promotes local supply chains, local employment and local training. Affordable housing is a really key element here. And the scheme seeks to provide 40%. There is a commitment for 40% affordable housing. That would actually mean that there are currently 22 affordable homes at Kingshurst. Those 22 units would be bolstered going up to 34, so it's a net increase in 12 affordable units throughout the village. And also, of course, members, the 86 dwellings proposed through this development would actually mean there's an additional 48 dwellings introduced at the site, which again very much helps with our 5-year housing land supply, where currently we can't demonstrate that 5 years. In terms of climate, the proposal seeks to achieve the net zero carbon, which again is very much endorsed and promoted through the council's statement on climate change, and we have a condition there to require that. The scheme is also conditioned so that there's a traffic regulation order running across the village, with that boulevard, the east-west vehicular access, having vehicle speeds of no more than 20 miles an hour. So essentially, members, this scheme is very well thought through. We are just simply being asked to consider the access details this evening, but the planning conditions that have been put in place alongside any approval very much require that this is a policy compliant scheme. In terms of community facilities, again, they have been considered with care, and there is the provision for all the existing community facilities to be re-provided for at the village. So, as I say, the recommendation is one of a strong approval. Thank you.
Thank you. There are speakers on this matter, so it's my responsibility to start the debate. The council standing orders require me to move the motion. Although I'm moving the motion, I am still undecided on how I will vote. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Councillor Grinsell, thank you very much. For my part, I think this seems to be a very welcome application for the area. It's an area that's been waiting for regeneration as part of the North Solihull area, and I know the area very well indeed. I'm particularly interested in the road re-engineering that's proposed, and the linking of the Kingshurst Park to the site, breaking the connection of the drive on Marston Drive. So I think that's a very positive development in terms of pedestrian access and the scale of the development. So I must admit I'm quite happy and minded to approve the application, although I will maintain a neutral position. But any other comments from other people? Councillor Cole.
Chair. I've been a Kingshurst Parish Councillor for well over 13 years, 10 years as chairman, and there isn't very many meetings where we haven't discussed what's happening with Kingshurst Parade. So this is really, really welcome, and it looks a good plan. We've still got other things to discuss because we're only discussing access tonight. All other matters have got to be talked about later. The residents have been fully briefed on this. We've had several meetings in the Kingshurst Library and in the space, well attended and well run by the council. And you know, this town centre development is years overdue, and I'm really happy and really glad that, you know, all of a sudden we're going to blow the whistle kick the ball and start the game going. It's well needed. The areas, the shopping centre itself is well run down, well past its sell-by date, and as I say, the parish council are in support of it, and we do want it to happen. So hopefully other councillors will support this and make a lot of people very happy tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Hall Allen, then Councillor Allen, then Councillor Slater.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I totally support what Councillor Cole has just said. Indeed, yourself, Chairman, well overdue. I mean, you're literally within, I don't know, walking a quarter of a mile of lake, and it's all very attractive around there. And this is just a real eyesore parts of this area. Councillor Cole, I couldn't do any more, but totally agree with you. I'm all in favour of this. I will listen to others, but I think it's. I just think it's well overdue. As you said, 1960 is a long time ago, and I hope that it will go forward when we've got more detail. But I think it's very much to be welcomed. I don't think there's more saying any more for it. Thank you very much for a very thorough introduction, Kim. I think that was very helpful, and there was some enthusiasm in your voice, and I must admit I share it. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree. It's looks like an excellent proposal to me. And yes, and whilst I know we are only considering the access matters today, I wonder, Kim, if I could just clarify one thing that you said about affordable housing. I think the affordable housing that you're talking about is actually social housing. Is that right?
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Allen. As I try to share with you all, there are 22 units at the moment in the village which are for affordable housing, and through this scheme, those numbers reach 34. But in terms of what type of affordable housing is to be proposed, thank you for raising it. Have to be clear. It would be all of those 34 units would be put over to social rent. Okay. If it were a different scheme, if it was a market scheme, we would normally be seeking 65% of the 40. Of that 40%, 65% of that as social rent, and the other 35 as shared ownership. But because of ensuring this scheme is viable, we as a council are going out for grant monies from Housing England, and again, to do that requires all the units to be for social rent. Okay.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
Later, then Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Chairman. I too welcome this, very much welcome it. It isn't an area I go to very often, but I went there a few years ago when I was mayor, quite a few times in 2015 and 16, and I was not very impressed with the area at all. Over the years, I've sat in various meetings where this has been discussed, and it seems as though we've discussed and discussed and discussed and nothing's ever happened, and now I'm very, very pleased to see that it has actually come to us and something is going to happen. I was also not very impressed with the way the town was laid out last time I looked at it, with the steps going up through the middle of the town, which made it very, very difficult for people with mobility problems to use the shopping centre in parts. And I'm very pleased to hear now that that's all going, and there's going to be a nice, from what Kim has told me, an incline up through the middle of the road there instead, and we won't have steps. I'm also very happy indeed that we have at last some social rented housing for people in that area. That is very much needed in Solihull. We need a lot more of it than what we're getting here, but at least it's a start. So I can see subject to this, and I will be supporting this application.
Then Councillor Rob.
Thank you. So this is for obviously today's application is for access and demolition only. So in many ways, it's quite straightforward. But I think there are other issues mentioned in the report that it's worth touching on. And one of the things that has been mentioned already is the social housing element. I think this is an excellent example of how you can have a mixed development that's truly mixed with, and here there is a lot of social housing already. It's a net increase being proposed at subsequent stages, not today. But I have every faith that that will be fulfilled, and this will be some for sale and some for social rent. That's an excellent mix, and that's what we need to look at more generally moving forward. This is my local shopping centre. It is very run down. It's not very nice to walk through that, what looked like a bit of a part of a prison that we saw earlier on. In the dark evenings and the dark afternoons, even in winter. And any improvement there is very welcome. There's a lot of wasted space at the moment that's just not used for anything and isn't accessible. So the outward facing nature that's proposed is excellent, as is the improved connectivity. I'm a little bit worried that so little space is being allocated for community uses, which is also something that's very important in the local area, but we'll wait to see what comes forward at later stages. I think one of the things that isn't necessarily clear in this that I'd like some clarity on is the part of the access. So I can see the access to the site from the south has been improved to incorporate the park, which is currently sort of out on a limb and not very well overlooked and poorly used as a result. So that's definitely very welcome. The report notes that it could be a little bit better, but it certainly seems like an improvement as is so far. Again, the access to the east and the west is really clear. The access to the housing from the north, by which I mean the connectivity between the very end of School Close through what's currently a garage area onto Church Close, is very sketchy in the plans before us. Every map and every picture has all the other accesses really clearly laid out, but that one there's just no detail at all. And as we're looking today at access and demolition, I would like to be reassured that that will be a proper access that's an improvement on what's there now, because it is quite regularly used and it's poor as it is at the moment. At the moment, I don't see a huge difference in that from what's proposed. The other thing I'd just like to raise is obviously this is the major shopping centre for the local area for people walking to their local shop. Is this the stage at which transition arrangements should also be provided, or will that come later too? It's probably later, but I'd just like to be reassured that we're not going to suddenly lose everything for a sustained period of time while that's all demolished and constructed. So if I could get some clarity on those 2 points, the access between School Close and Church Close, and whether transitional arrangements will be discussed at a later stage, that would be great. Thank you.
Chairman, may I respond now? Please. Yeah. Thank you. In terms of the access, I would like my colleague Ben Malin, who's our highway engineer, to help to input in that. But dealing with your second point, Councillor McNaughton, in terms of transitional arrangements. Now, again, we have a phasing strategy condition set out in the report, but again, we've anticipated this question, and obviously we want to be aware of that too. So basically, the intention would be, in terms of decanting, that all the community facilities remain functional. It may well be that some of the facilities, like the pharmacy, for example, relocate, but the doctor's surgery would remain open and operable until the new facility is built out. And again, there's a number of vacancies already in the village centre, given the large amount of retail floor space that it has, and in those, some of those units will be made use of for the community facilities as the phasing goes through. Thank you. Okay. And again, can I just, as a point of clarification, because I may have misheard you, Councillor McNaughton, but going back to the affordable housing, the two conditions in our packs, they relate to conditions 43 and 44. But one of the conditions deals with the tenure. Again, there's a table in your report at page 53 that extracts that. So I just want to be clear with you in terms of how that 40% of the total, which is 34, how that would be split up. And it's divided between one-bed masonettes, one-bed flats, two-bed houses, three-bed houses, and four-bed houses. But again, all of those elements would be for social rent and not for shared ownership. Ben, are you happy to take Councillor McNaughton through that access he was sharing?
Yeah, that's fine, Kim.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So with regards to the two accesses that you mentioned, Councillor McNaughton, the access from School Close will remain unchanged. That doesn't actually form part of this application. It won't actually serve any development within this red line boundary. With regards to the junction, the Church Close over Green Drive junction, that will also remain the same, even though it's certainly not as wide as we would like it. The proposals will actually reduce the amount of traffic that will be coming off that junction. So it's been considered that as the junction has been operating safely so far, that with a reduced level of traffic being served off it as a result of this development, it should continue to do so as well. Thank you.
Chair, just a slight misunderstanding of my question, if I might clarify.
Carry on.
Yes, so thank you. I appreciate what you're saying about Church Close. I think so. The red boundary does include what's currently a garage area at the very end of School Close, and it looks like those are being demolished to create some houses. No issue with that. But the papers make reference to the walkway currently between that dead end for cars onto what is currently, but not on these plans for the future, Church Close. It won't be Church Close in the future. It's just called Street now and would lead to the retail section. So there is reference made in the document pack to an improvement of that pedestrian walkway, but it's the only thing that I don't really see clarity on in the map itself. So I just wanted to make sure that is being retained and improved as it says in the text, but because it's not in the pictures, if that makes sense.
Okay, Councillor Ryan.
And this is a very exciting application. It's an application with all matters reserved. So that is important that the local community plays a big part in how this application moves forward into the detailed stage. And I think involving the local community will have positive benefits at the end. And involving the police and other statutory bodies will also have a beneficial effect. But I do believe it's all credit to Solihull Council for its enabling strength for this to happen. Many local authorities up and down the country would like to see such an investment take place within their authority in view of the present climate. Something in the region of 3.5 million and more will be invested into Kingshurst. In this present time, with what's happening nationally, that's an amazing achievement for Solihull. But Solihull has had amazing achievements over the years, particularly with its regeneration and affordable houses across the borough, when in fact no other local authority was having that kind of impact. So we need to give credit where credit is due. This would not happen if it hadn't been for the enabling strength of Solihull Council. But one area, Chairman, of disappointment for me is that I would have expected Kingshurst Parish Council to have observations. And if you look at page 33, Kingshurst Parish Council, no observations. Well, they ought to be playing a part in this planning process, but it needs to be done in a way of putting forward ideas and observations of how you can incorporate this plan holistically for the community. And I like what Kim Allen has said. It was an enthusiastic presentation, but she amplified about the community being brought together in different sections of the church, the park, and the wider community. I think that's very important to make a development like this work. We should not be repeating and never repeat some of the mistakes that were made of the 60s. And Chairman, I welcome this application. I give it my full support, and we will obviously play our part as it moves forward to make sure it turns out to be one of the best developments in Solihull. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Cole.
Just come back to what Councillor Ryan said about Kingshurst Parish Council, no observations. There have been several meetings with the leaders of the councils over many years. Councillor Slay and Councillor Courts have both been down to full council meetings and public meetings to discuss the proposed development of the centre. The parish council, all the parish councillors attended the meetings in January and February that were held at Kingshurst Library and in the space. So all the councillors did attend and made observations on the forms that were provided by the officers. Unfortunately, when it came to having a full council meeting on this, we were immediately dumped into lockdown. But be rest assured, Councillor Ryan, that all the parish councillors did attend the seminars that were set up in the library and in the space, and all made observations. It's just unfortunate that I don't think that this reflects on page 33 the input that the parish councillors did have. So be rest assured they did get involved.
And Chairman, I can completely endorse what Councillor Cole's just shared with you. In terms of community engagement, it's been second to none, and it's gone on for many years. So the community have been fully involved and continue to be so, which is great.
Councillor Norton.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very clear that Kingshurst Parish Council have had a lot of input into this over the years, so there's no question of that. Just Chair, just before Jim Ryan was about to speak, I think Kim Allen was going to answer or provide some reassurance for my question that I clarified. I think we misunderstood each other a bit there. I just wondered if that's possible on the access. It looked like it was just a short sentence, but she was on mute, and she's made that.
Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry. What I was wanting to do, just to get so that everybody was on board, I was wanting to ask Lee if he could get the PowerPoint back up so that we can talk through that on plan form. Is that okay? So that everyone's clear on which particular part of the site Councillor McNaughton's referring to. Because obviously, thank you, Lee. So if you can just scroll through until we get to an appropriate plan. And Councillor McNaughton, if you want to share, so that's existing, keep going. And again. Should we stop there?
That'll do. Yeah, that'll, right. So if we could just go back to the previous one briefly and then back to this. Right, so that on the top right there, that sort of concrete walkway links the shopping centre to Church Close at present. Now, if we carry on to the next slide. The location of that is just, see that the large amount of trees in the north, it comes out near there. That walkway then continues to the left of a row of 4 houses right at the top of that, along the red line and through to the very top, the thin red line bit at the very top, onto School Close. Now that's the access that I'm concerned about, because there is mention in the documents about that being retained between what's now School Close and what's now Church Close and School Close. But on the map, it's not clear that it will be, because it looks like the house and garden go right up to the edge of the site there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I'm with you now. I understand, and I understand what parts you're referring to. Again, in terms of how we take this forward, the access arrangements that we are seeking for determination is the changes to the access, and there is no change for that one there. So it really comes down to layout. And again, Ben, if at any point you want to interject, then please do so. But as I say, my understanding is that aspect is something very much that isn't set in stone because of the way that layout is indicated, which of course is indicative. Would you agree with that, Ben?
Yeah, Kim. Yeah, I understand that the pedestrian access will be retained, but then, like you say, the details of that will then be agreed at a later date.
That's fine. My concern was that we might be agreeing to close that off, but if we're not doing that, that's absolutely fine.
No, thank you. Thank you, Lee. Thanks.
So I think unless anyone would like to speak, we can go to a vote.
Chairman, before you do, sorry, in my presentation, I did forget to point out the update note that that we have written, and essentially the update note basically introduces one new condition about providing hours of operation for the commercial and the community uses, stating that before they're occupied, then we agree hours. And the second point is just a small amendment to the condition around travel plans, just to make clear that there's an end stop to that condition. The way it's worded, it would carry on in perpetuity. And the end stop would be, we expect every 2 years, we expect the plans to be revisited until such times as the objectives of the travel plan are met. So that's what the that's, as I say, that's what the update note provides for. And in terms of conditions around affordable housing, again, I feel that it's important that the conditions we have in place do identify that it is social rents is the proposal. And again, if I feel it's there, but I wanted to make that clear with you. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So if we could call a vote then, please.
Councillor Allen.
Can I just say, just before we start, the recommendation is as per the amendment set out in the update note as amended.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Goff.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Grinsell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Holler.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Holt. Thank you. Councillor Holt.
4.
Thank you. Councillor McNaughton. Councillor McNaughton. Councillor McNaughton. Councillor McNaughton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Slater.
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. That's great. Well, that's a wonderful way to end the evening, I think. What a wonderful, positive news story in such difficult times. So let's hope this can be the start of a new future for that area in particular. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance this evening.
Chairman, point of order, delegated decisions on the agenda.
Yes, thank you. Item 16, delegated decisions. At pages 163. Any comment on those, or are we just noting them? We just note them.
We're just requesting you to note them, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. So wonderful evening. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your attendance and your attention to detail in terms of the papers, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Good night, everybody.
Bye bye all.
Bye bye.